Well, good afternoon. You're listening to the new WCEG Network on WCEGTalkRadio.com. Click your live stream tab or watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, WCEG Network. I'm Celeste Giordano, your show host for the next hour. We're the Global Legacy Wealth Building, and we're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Subscribe free to our YouTube channel at WCEG Network. Like and follow and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We also have new platforms that you can download the free mobile app on Apple as WCEG Talk Radio. And again, I'm Celeste Giordano, your show co-host, and today is our nonprofit show. And I'm also the co-founder of Women in Community Impact, who hosts this show on the platform of WCEG Network with Penny Rogers. And we are honored and privileged to have this opportunity to be here to sponsor and to bring to life other nonprofits that are doing amazing things in our community. And Penny, we just thank you for this opportunity and this platform. And we appreciate you and everything that you do to get the word out to our community, to educate and inform them. Well, hello, ladies. Happy New Year. How are you?
You're doing well. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And today, our guests today are from Street Grace, and I have Brooke Ruffin. She's Chief of Staff. And then I also have, Faith Cadona. Did I say that right, Faith? And she's a subject matter expert. And I want to make sure that I read their bios today because these are two of my favorite ladies and one of my favorite nonprofits, Street Grace. Bob Rogers and I became friends back in 2016, and it has just been an awesome opportunity to be here to support Street Grace and the things that you've done over the years, to have you speak at our networking events in person, as well as on the radio shows. And we just really, really appreciate both of you ladies and Street Grace and what you're doing for the community. So happy New Year, and thank you ladies for being here.
Pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely. And so we're just gonna jump right in, or I guess maybe what I would like to do is, with it being a new year, because Brooke, I remember, have you been back in Atlanta? Is this your second year that you're back from LA?
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit, because you were over in LA and now you're back. Are you glad to be back in Atlanta?
I am. Yes, and we're thrilled to be home. And it's nice to be back with my Street Grace cohorts. But yes, we did the whole nomadic living. And it's wonderful and peaceful, but then the old brick and mortar and indoor plumbing also are wonderful.
And you have an addition to your family, I believe, did you not?
We do. Yes, we have a 10-month-old.
Absolutely. Congratulations. And we're just so glad to have you back and everything that you're doing. And Faith, you have just been busy, and tell us a little bit what you've been keeping up with over the last year or so.
Really just advice, keeping up with the Survivor Advisory Council. So, Street Grace has a council in Texas and Georgia. Really just overseeing that, navigating that, living life with others, in school now. So getting a master's in marriage and family therapy. And so I'll graduate this year. So lots of,
Oh, congratulations.
and so yeah, just lots of different things.
Well, that is awesome. We're glad to hear that. And you guys just do a phenomenal job and everything that you do. I mean, you're such a heart-centered individuals, and Street Grace has just grown and leaps and bounds over the last several years. And you guys have an amazing team together there, and we're just grateful and privileged and honored that you're on our show here today, because January is Human Sex Trafficking Awareness Month, is it not?
Yes.
And so we are just glad to have you here. And so before I get started, I want people to know just a little bit more about you. And so, Brooke, I'm going to read your bio for our audience. And also for our audience and listeners, we want to make sure that if you have any questions or anything, look into the chat put it in the chat. We'll be glad to answer any of those questions because we're here to educate and inform the community about Human Sex Trafficking Awareness Month, how you can get involved with organizations like Street Grace. We're coming up in February on Advocacy Day, and I'm sure that Brooke and Faith are going to share a lot of that with us. So with that being said, Brooke, I would love to read your bio because it's phenomenal. Brooke Ruffin graduated magna cum laude from the University of Florida and has a background in advocacy and performance. A survivor of childhood sexual abuse herself, she is dedicated to removing the stigma and educating children on how they can protect themselves from exploitation. She has completed an equity principal contract with Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, and after moving to Atlanta, she began teaching with the Music Class Inc., focusing on brain development and the effects of music on the memory. Throughout her performance career, she remained a strong advocate and volunteer for sexual abuse survivors and developed a dance class focused on reestablishing survivors' emotional connection to their physical bodies. That's awesome. Brooke is dedicated to the fight against the commercial sexual exploitation of children, has been on staff with Street Grace for over 5 years. That's awesome. Congratulations. She has previously served as operational manager and director of outreach with the organization, contributing to the development of training, content, awareness, campaigns, and community engagement initiatives. And a little bit about Street Grace, if you're not familiar with it. Street Grace is a faith-based organization that utilizes evidence-based demand reduction strategies to eradicate the commercial exploitation of children through prevention, protection, policy, and pursuit. CSEC is sexual activity with a child in exchange of something valued to the child or the third person. So that is just an amazing thing, Brooke. I was just sitting here thinking when it said 5 years, I think I remember the first time that you came to work with Street Grace, and you were one of our guest speakers. I don't know if you came by yourself or if you were with Bob Rogers at one of our in-person meetings. And it's just hard to believe how fast time flies. Mm-hmm. And where you came in initially with Street Grace and where you are today. So our hearts just love your hearts, and congratulations on the experience and the things that you're doing to help people in the community with Street Grace.
Thank you, Celeste. I so appreciate it. Yes, you were one of my first events, and I believe my first public speaking event because somebody got sick. I wasn't there on purpose, so we're very gracious. It was a wonderful first event.
Absolutely, and it's just been beautiful to watch you grow over the years and where you are today. So that is just an amazing story. And now what I'd love to do, Faith, is I'd love to share a little bit about your bio. Faith is a subject matter expert in the fields of human trafficking, addiction, and domestic violence. She has a master's of administration of justice and security and keeps God at the center of her life. Faith is currently working on her master's in marriage and family studies with the hopes to continue working with survivors and their families. Faith is one of the founding members of the Street Grace Survivor Advisory Council and has served for the last 7 years on the council. Certified in trauma-informed care for youth and adults, Faith is also a certified facilitator with Ending the Game and is the first woman in Georgia to be a licensed contract facilitator with Tyro Moms Leadership Program. Did I do that right? Which helps women overcome the effects of incarceration and integrate back into the family units. Faith has created curriculum and taught women in a residential treatment facility how to overcome trafficking and addiction. Before coming to Street Grace, Faith was a case manager, intake coordinator, and residential support assistance for women at House of Cherub. Faith has also helped create and establish a survivor mentor program with Street Grace and Hope Court of Chatham County, Georgia. Chatham, is that down in Savannah? Very good. As the coordinator, she connected with young youth survivors in the program with adult survivor mentors while also mentoring several of the youth. Faith has helped draft key legislation in Georgia along with the Survivor Advisory Council to assist survivors in getting their records vacated or restricted, which passed under SB 435 in 2019. She was also instrumental in the name change bill, which passed under SB 34 in 2021, so that survivors can now get their names changed under sealed instead of publicity. Faith has also advised on her key legislation initiatives and bills in Georgia during the past several years. Faith has volunteered with Atlanta Redemption, Inc., ARI, by assisting survivors to their tattoo appointments so their trafficking brands could be covered. And Faith, what an amazing bio and stories and all the things that you have done in the communities in the state of Georgia to get things done to advocate for these people. So our heart loves your heart, and thank you both for everything that you do in our communities. All right, so we're ready to get started here, and what we're going to do here today is we're going to talk about some of the things like, how is Street Great unique in the anti-trafficking space? And I'm just going to open that out there because I would love to get both of y'all's opinion on this.
Certainly. So when I was looking for an anti-trafficking organization, I went around to several. And what I found to be unique about Street Grace is that they were focused on preventing the stories of abuse. So often you are only hearing of people's stories after they've gone through this, and rarely is there the chance to be a part of preventing this type of exploitation, and for the aim to be for there to be no more stories left to tell. Faith and I will both freely say that we would love to wake up and not have a job the next day because there's no more sexual exploitation of children. As well as being buyer focused. So the true unique thing about Street Grace is that that we believe all things can be, Christ is seeking to redeem all things back to him in all circumstances and at all times. And so that also means the people who are perpetrating these crimes, the buyer traffickers and the traffickers, the seller traffickers. So figuring out what is breaking these people to the point where they're wanting to purchase the abuse of a child, and offering resources for healing on the beginning of the cycle of abuse, if you will. So that we can be seeing our youth as our future victimized population and also our future buyer population, because that will be the only true way that we see the end of this evil.
So
Absolutely. Go ahead, Faith. I was going to ask you, do you have some comments with that, please?
I think the other thing is that Street Grace is very much so about having the survivor voice. And so with the council being created, one of the things very early on was we need to know what survivors are saying. And so several of us got together and started advising Street Grace on policy, on programming, on how to be more survivor informed and trauma informed when hiring survivors, not just the prevention and the policy and different things like that, but also the relational aspects of it as well. So Street Grace works very close with survivors, which also removes the stigma that survivors have when they reintegrate back into businesses or nonprofits or corporations, because a lot of times they feel different. And so Street Grace really just embraces it more as a family than as, oh, well, you're a survivor and you just stay over here. And, it is more the long-term and longevity of really partnering with someone who has the lived experience.
Absolutely. So let me ask you something. How has trafficking, grooming changed in recent years?
Oh, so many ways. And it changes so fast. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face as an anti-trafficking organization, is that it's very intelligent businessmen and women who are running this very lucrative business. And so they are, any prevention methods or protective methods that we put up, they are quickly finding their own way around, right? So we're having to adapt. You have to remain very flexible. Definitely the transfer to technology. We used to be able to name the worst corners in the Atlanta area for trafficking, and now with technology, they're able to cast such a wide net. I would say also the pace at which it occurs. It used to take, 4 to 6 months to gain a relationship with a teen, and to build that confidence up to meet them in person or to gain photos of them. And now we're seeing these relationships be built in less than 18 hours online because it's one, so normalized to exchange explicit content, but also the consumer has been connected directly to what they're seeing as the product, our children, through apps like OnlyFans, where the trafficker is almost removed because the buyer is able to comment and offer at the monetary backing before it's even entered the teen's mind that that might be a possibility.
I think another thing too is that, 8 years ago when I was being trafficked, everything was in hotels or on the street. It was very much so a set amount of websites that, kids and adults would be trafficked on. And now it's more social media based. It's not so much the dark web or lucrative websites or anything like that. It is really a Facebook message. It's an Instagram DM. It's TikTok messaging. It is in Discord. It is in so many different apps that we could spend hours just talking about the various ways that kids and adults are trafficked online. And it's even in the gaming systems where, as when I was going through it, it wasn't so much on those platforms because they hadn't really exploded like they have now. And so I think the other thing to that too is traffickers are smart. They're not dumb individuals. And we may think that they are in certain regards, but they're really not. So like Brooke said, every time that we do something to combat it, they come back with something different. They have books on how to be a pimp. They have websites on how to be a pimp. It's in the music industry, entertainment industry is just inundated with pimp culture, and how it's easy to see something like that as a kid and want to look like this person or have this kind of lavish lifestyle when you don't have much, or really just have that kind of influence. And so a lot of times kids are just trapped in it because they see something that they don't have, but they don't realize the effects of what comes with it when they talk to these individuals or get in a car with somebody they don't know because they've had an argument with their mom. And so it's real easy to find kids now through social media, whereas before it took a lot of work. And so technology has made it very, very easy.
And I think last time when I had you ladies on the show, one of the things that really I was taken back by, and I brought this to your attention for your comments, is these parents today. I mean, all these kids, I mean, very young, have these mobile devices, and how parents need to really, really monitor that stuff. And I know that sometimes these kids at night, they take their phones to their bedrooms. I mean, I think all those kids' phones needs to be in the kitchen on the counter, shut off, and not in the bedroom with them when they go night night. So I mean, it's just, and I don't know how. I think there's a majority of the parents are aware of it, but yet a majority, or a lot of parents, just trust and say, that's my child will never do that. Is that right?
Or my child. And it's an educational thing, to continue to educate parents. It's a really having those hard conversations that are age appropriate with kids. And, we grew up on stranger danger. So we grew up, Brooke and I were talking about this earlier. We grew up on the white van and the old man that might come out of the white van and snatch you at the gas station or the bus stop or, somewhere like that. So we had this very limited mindset of what a stranger looks like. And now a stranger is anyone. And so it's really reframing those conversations with kids, and being able for them to come and say, hey, somebody sent me this message on Instagram and I don't know what to do with it and I don't know how to respond. They're asking for nude photos, they're asking for a video, right? And teaching kids that, don't friend somebody you don't know. And because we are so normalizing it, doing it, it's really not being a vigilante, but it's really understanding that you really have to pay attention. And Brooke said this earlier, if your kid doesn't make your face turn red, then you're not having the right kind of conversation. like it should make you blush. It should make you uncomfortable, but that's how a child knows that there's something wrong with some of the things that they're experiencing doing because of peer pressure.
Well, and that's so true. And I'll only say this, then we'll move on about that. With all these social media things, there's certain settings that you can put on these accounts, and parents really need to do that. Some people, their accounts are public, everybody sees it. People can just follow you, they can do this, they can do that. And parents need to get on there and look and see what their kids are doing and what they're saying and what they're posting. And I know that I have seen some on different social media things, people that I know that have children, and I'm thinking if their mother saw that picture, that picture wouldn't be there right now. And and it wasn't nothing, sexual or anything, but just the way it was just like you were just inviting stuff, to it. But anyways, that's another thing. So one thing I thought maybe I didn't start with, and that, Brooke, I'd like to propose this question to you, is for our audience and listeners, maybe not everybody knows exactly what Street Grace does. And so maybe let's back up a minute and just give us a talk a little bit about the things that Street Grace does, and the monitoring and the things that they do. And you're in 3 states.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I'm on mute because somebody's knocking at the door. So if you hear dogs in the background for my answer, I apologize. So yes, our mission is to eradicate the commercial sexual exploitation of children, the acronym CSEC. So you'll hear that interchangeably with things like DMST, or the domestic minor sex trafficking of children. And in general, it is. Here, Faith, can you take this away? And I will be right back.
Yes. So
this person's not even
not sure where Brooke just left off. But Street Grace really, we do a lot of very different things. So we have direct services team that works with youth under the age of 18, and they do case management. It's 12 to 18 months. They are licensed clinical social workers, so they're the only ones that have access to the kids. The other thing we kind of touched on, I think, a little bit earlier, Celeste, when we first started talking, was Gracie, which is our technology platform, which actually intercepts calls from buyers. And so instead of a buyer talking to a 12, 13, 14-year-old boy or girl, any demographic, they now talk to Gracie. And Gracie's moved from the chatbot, which you remember, to this technology platform where law enforcement can use it in operations to really just go after the demand side of it, right? So any transaction that is interrupted where a buyer was to be talking to a child, but instead talks to Gracie, is one less child who's being trafficked. And then we have like law enforcement trainings, community trainings. We train at churches and schools. We have Youth Leadership Academy, where can come into the school system. We can come into like a YMCA or like a church youth group, and we can teach kids about how to be good leaders, right? What does it mean to be a leader in today's culture? What is good relationships versus bad relationships, right? Like some kids really don't know the difference. What is trafficking? What is sextortion and sexting? All of these things that are hard conversations for some people to have. We want to be able to open and bridge that gap between us and the next generation to really be able to catch some of these things before it happens. I know as a YLA facilitator, when I said something about sexting, kids' hands were going up. Oh, I know somebody who's doing that. Oh, I know somebody who did that the other day. And then you could see some of them kind of slump down in their seat, like, oh, like it was them that was doing it or had received it. And so, we want kids to understand that, pictures never go away online. I was at a law enforcement conference last week, and I had them run my photo just in one of their apps that they use strictly for law enforcement, and all my photos came up. I wish I would have taken a picture of it to show kids, like, see, even photos from 10 years ago are still online. And so it's understanding and teaching kids that your online presence goes everywhere with you.
Yes.
So that's, just a little bit about Youth Leadership Academy too.
Absolutely. And I'll let Brooke finish up with that. What it was is before we started the show, we were talking about this, but we didn't talk about it on the air. So that's why I thought I need to back up for a minute, because we talked about that previous. So now we're involving the law enforcement can be involved. Brooke, if you want to carry on with that a little bit. And I know Faith talked about being in the schools and the leadership programs. You're also in 3 states. You're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then is it Dallas, Texas?
Houston, Texas.
Houston. I'm sorry.
Yes, so that's where our physical offices are. And then with a lot of our programming being national, that's one of I know the gifts are rare that came from the COVID time, but one thing is kind of removing the limitations that we had as an organization and as a people, just kind of opening up this virtual world for everybody. So yes, using Transaction Intercept to benefit our law enforcement partners, where they can log in and see the activity that the chatbot is having is now a full technology platform. They can go in, select the conversation, manually take over, and let them know a location so that they can set a location and make that arrest. So previously we were gathering all of these numbers without much to do after the fact, other than look at them for buyer demographics to aid future prevention efforts. Now action is able to be taken by the right people, and people can use this technology for free to increase their arrest, so that it's not condensed into a month of awareness where they're going to blow their sting operation budget, or because they don't have an undercover officer on staff, they aren't able to run all of the sting operations that they'd like to. It's removing many limitations and making it a far more cost-effective and efficient process.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brooke. In the beginning, the Gracie thing was where you would just let somebody know, and it didn't involve being an arrest or anything like that. It just let them know and to guide them to get some help and provide them with information where they could get help. Is that correct?
Yes, a text would be delivered that says your number is now registered as somebody trying to purchase sex with a minor and is available to law enforcement. So we were never pretending to be law enforcement. We were very clear that we weren't. But it does have that scare tactic of your number is now registered. You can't get a new phone. That number will always be registered to you at that time. It also lists the ramifications of your actions, the number of years in prison, the amount of money in the fines that you would owe, things of that nature. Because there was a stat that said a first-time buyer would call about 7 to 9 times before actually going through with the purchase. So of course, the hope is that we're reaching some of those first-time buyers before they actually ever physically abuse somebody. But also for the repeats, just letting them know that people are out there and you can no longer exploit children with full anonymity.
Right. And so now with the allowing the police officers to get involved, now you can go right for an arrest. Is that what you're saying?
The law enforcement officers are going to be able to use the platform to set a location to make the arrest, because somebody actually has to show up with the money for the crime to be. So conversing with a bot specifically, oh, well, they were never even talking to a person. How could they have committed a crime? So even though their intent was made clear, to actually prosecute, they've got to show up with that money.
I got you. Okay. Thank you very much for explaining that. So what are traffickers looking for today?
They are looking for vulnerable youth. So they're looking for posts that maybe you got into an argument with your parents. They're looking for people who may be victims of online bullying, people that they can easily sweep in and be their point of contact, their only confidant. They want you to feel alone and they want to feel like they are your only person, right? So if you are sharing photos that are already semi-sexually explicit, they may not think it's going to be too hard to push you that next step to maybe make a video for somebody or to take a private photo for somebody. They are looking for details in the background of photos. Oftentimes, parents will see that a lot of things are innocent, those first day of school photos that list their class, their age, their full name, their school, just giving so much information about their child, the birthday signs in the front yard saying exactly where they live, how old they are in their name, things that people, yes, it doesn't mean that your child is going to be trafficked right off the bat, but it is giving somebody the information so that they would not set off the stranger danger warning flags for your child. So if somebody's coming up to your child at school and they're saying, "Oh, hey, Savannah, how was your birthday on Saturday?" They're going to think that it's one of their parents' friends that they just forgot, right? They're not,
Right.
so this person isn't going to set off those same red flags. So they're looking for vulnerable youth. Of course, families suffering from food insecurity or addiction, things of that nature, will put you at higher risk because that child's going to be dependent on others for their primary needs. All children are dependent on others for their primary needs. And so it's very important to remember that essentially makes them more vulnerable, not even to mention that their frontal lobes aren't fully developed, so their decision making is skewed. They have all of the emotional scope that we do, but not all of the processing capability.
Well, and also I think when you have children where their parents are going through divorce or separation or something, is very hard on children, and they're feeling like maybe it's their fault, or they're taking the blame for it, or they're feeling insecure. And I think parents, some parents out there, it's all about them, but it's about the children, and you take care of the children first.
Right.
It's not about you. It's about those children and protecting those children and what's best for those children. Because if you don't, they're going to go looking for it someplace else.
Right. And that first time boyfriend that's a couple of years older, first time somebody's told you that you're beautiful, and oh, your friends are so immature. If your parents don't like this boyfriend, then your parents just don't understand how mature you are. If you're doubting sending that sext, that boyfriend's, oh, I thought you were ready for a mature relationship. Maybe you're not, because this is what boyfriends and girlfriends do for each other. They're just at the prime age, unfortunately, for manipulation, and they are given all of the tools necessary to hide things from their parents. There are apps specifically so that you can hide photos from a parental phone check, the calculator that is actually a phone storage app, or having the Finsta that they basically all have. They have the Instagram that you're allowed to follow, and then they have the Instagram that's just for their friends. So it's important to have those monthly check-ins, have that living room charging station, like you mentioned, because traffickers know when a child is not supervised online. If a child is on TikTok and is live streaming from their bedroom at 3 a.m., they're going to know that they're not being supervised online.
Supervised, exactly.
So they're smart. They know when to reach out, and they know when not to be present in your child's comments.
Absolutely. We had an incident last week where I live. There's an elementary school right next door to our subdivision. And I was working at my desk, and I saw all these cars with, mothers with children coming down. And I live in the cul-de-sac. They come down, they went down the cul-de-sac, they go out. And I mean, there was just like a stream. If I probably saw 10, I probably saw 20 of those cars coming in. I thought, oh, somebody must be having a party or something, somebody's birthday. Well, and then on our neighborhood app, this is an elementary school, 1st through 5th grade. And evidently, one of the children got into an argument or fight and didn't get on the bus and just started walking. And so they were trying to find this child, and I mean, thank God that they did find her, but it wasn't but like it was an hour later that she was out just walking down the road. And I mean, that's elementary school.
I was 10 years old the first time I ran away from home. Mom and I'm glad we did not have social media, but anybody could have picked me up. My mom and I got into an argument and I took off walking and she couldn't find me for hours and I didn't call home. And so that's what we face with kids today, especially the divorced families and things like that. When there's tension, when there's arguments, when there's all of these different things happening in the home, kids don't know how to process it. So either they run or they have behavior issues or, they act out in some kind of way because it's the only way they know how to process their emotions. They don't have the words that we have to give a voice to it. And so fight, flight, or freeze, and that's how it plays out for a lot of kids.
Well, in fact, you said something, and this is a pet peeve for me, is when it comes with parents getting divorced. I see so often where the mother turns the children against the father turns the children against the mother. I'll be the only mother you'll ever know, or, if the father remarries or vice versa. And, I just think how selfish that is and how damaging that is to that child, because that child will always have two parents. It will always have a mother and a father. And you should always build that other parent up, not tear them down. And I just, I see that a lot.
That's a good point, Celeste, too, because when my parents went through a divorce, me and my sister were pitted against each parent. And so, there was all these horrible things that was said about my dad before we went for a weekend. Even during their divorce, we were sitting in the courtroom and we would be put in these separate rooms. Which parent do you want to live with? And we would say mom. And then the other attorney would come in. Which parent do you want to live with? And we would say dad, because we didn't want to have them separated. And so, to your point, I think the thing that parents need to understand is that is another added layer of vulnerability for kids.
It
Because
is.
trust. And so if they can't trust mom and they can't trust dad because they're constantly arguing and saying all these horrible things about each other, then the very first person that comes along that meets that love need, that meets that need to just be able to relax, be in somebody's presence, that's what a trafficker does. And that's what buyers do. And so if a child feels that from someone else, they're going to gravitate towards that person, and then they're going to isolate more and more away from their parents. I mean, I left home at 17. I didn't like the fighting anymore. I didn't like all these different things. And no one was really helping me figure out why I felt the way I did. It was just, your dad's this, your mom's this, and that was that. There was no love at all that was shown in the kind of way that I needed it as a child. And so that was just a vulnerability for me, which is, I mean, they could be 8 years old and still be experiencing something like that. And they just don't know how to process it. I love that you
Go ahead, Faith. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
But I love that you brought that up.
Well, no, because it's near and dear to my heart, and that's a story for another time. Because also these children, and thank goodness that some of these children didn't end up being exploited or being sex trafficked, but the mental damage that it does to them when they're in their 30s and 40s, and when they have grown children, and then it's a ripple effect that they train their children that I don't have a relationship with my dad. He's a bad person, and he really wasn't a bad person, but it was instilled in them that he was.
Yeah.
And sometimes you think as you get older that these children will grow out of it, but they don't.
You're right.
And that's really sad, and that's just another issue for mental health issues, for those people like that. So for our audience and listeners, always be a good support for both sides of the parents, the mother, the father. And if you're siblings, you should be supportive of both as well, not where you're picking and choosing. And things happen, divorce happens. We have people that lose a partner or a spouse through death or cancer or something, but always be supportive of that other partner or spouse. I think it's important. What is the best way to prevent exploitation?
Education, conversations, honest conversations. Sometimes kids stumble into pornography because a parent doesn't know how to talk about same-sex attraction. They don't know how to have those hard conversations. Kids are curious. They're hearing it more and more in school. And so they will go look up you know, what is a lesbian? What is this? What is that? And then they stumble onto pornography. And so, you know, pornography can lead to another vulnerability for trafficking. And if parents are not willing or they don't know how to sit down and really have these tough conversations of, okay, this is what this is, but, you know, and really educate themselves on these topics as well as educate their children, you know, because kids have lots of questions. You know, we don't live in a world anymore where, or we live in a world now where everything's at your fingertips. So if you want knowledge, you Google it.
You
Or you,
Google it.
you know, one of those things. A lot of kids get all their information on TikTok. And so if parents aren't aware of the kind of information their kids are getting, then, you know, they're not having the right kind of conversations. And so it really is an education thing that just, we need to just keep, when one person learns it, give it to another person, share it with another person. You know, we have Keeping Kids Safe in the Digital Age where, you know, Brooke does a great job training parents on, you know, what apps to look out for. How do we keep our kids safe? How do we have age appropriate conversations? Because you can start these conversations when kids are 2, 3, 4, you know, you just do it at the age that they can receive it. And then you develop a trusting relationship with your child where they can come tell you anything. Mom, I saw this on Instagram today. Or mom, I saw somebody dancing naked on TikTok, which happens quite a bit. And when they come and they have that conversation with the parent, instead of a parent freaking out and getting mad, how did you see that? Why did you look at it? It is, okay, let's sit down and talk about this, right? Because it's not the child's fault that it's online.
Yeah.
They could have been looking at something like Veggie Tales or I don't know. I don't know what the things are, the new shows are. And on anime porn online. You know, Pinterest has anime all over it, but it's pornographic. And so there is a lot of pornographic things out there that parents need to be aware of. And it's
On
on
Pinterest? On Pinterest?
Pinterest. I know I
Really?
stumbled upon porn by looking up anime characters and saw pornographic material and didn't tell anybody for a while because no one had that conversation with this individual. And then all of a sudden it just kind of spiraled and spiraled. And then when they did ask, they were told to go Google, what is this? And they found more pornography. And so in it, when parents are afraid to talk, and I'm not blaming parents, but it's just that fear of talking to your kids about these really hard life topics, then they're going to go find out anyways. So if you're not teaching your child, the internet's going to teach them, and their friends at school are going to teach them, you know, and it doesn't matter whether it's a private Christian school or a public school. It happens in both.
Both. It happens in both, most definitely. Well, yeah, I don't have a TikTok thing. I don't even know about it and don't want it. But again, it just goes back. I mean, I think yeah, these children today, younger and younger, are getting on these things. And I know there's probably an age limit before they can have an account, but then parents just let them have an account, right? And then I see in restaurants where, you know, we're starting this thing when we have, you know, 3, 4, 5-year-old kids, and we're sitting down at a restaurant, and the parent gives them their phone. You know, them 3, 4-year-old kids can operate that phone better than I can. You know, and they're growing up in that age that they can go right through everything. So, you know, parents need to use some good common sense, and they need to inspect what they expect if they're going to give a child a phone, and they need to check that phone, you know, depending on their age. The younger they are, in my opinion, you need to check it more often, and but you still need to inspect what you expect with your children and their phones. Um, what is the best way to prevent exploitation? Or did I just ask that? I think I did. That's what I thought. How is Street Grace working to change the human trafficking policy landscape in Georgia?
Brooke, oh, okay. So quite honestly, it is really, again, there's that survivor voice, like what is needed, like the vacatur and expungement policy and the name change bill. It is really listening to the struggles that survivors have reintegrating back into society, right? Like there's one survivor in particular that was told that this man told her, she has 3 children, single mom, I'm not going to rent to a prostitute, because she had prostitution charges on her record that when someone ran a background check, they found. And so it's removing the stigma in some of that. And policy work helps us do that. It helps us remove the stigma for survivors, but it also helps us harshen penalties for buyers and traffickers. And so I think the one thing is that continual not giving up. There's a persistence or a perseverance, if you will, that is okay. If the bill doesn't pass this year, we're going to try again next year, right? Because we know how important it is to have certain policies affect how survivors live, how buyers and traffickers are prosecuted and things like that. Because if we continue as a state or even as a nation to allow trafficking to continue because we don't have stricter punishments and policies in place, then that's because we know better. But it is that, if or policymakers aren't listening, then we have an issue. And I think the one thing that Street Grace does really well is they persevere at advocacy work, persevere at policy. We don't give up when it comes to trying to get legislation to be passed that is protecting our most vulnerable population, which is our children.
Absolutely. And talking about legislation, what legislation has Street Grace helped with in the past and has helped with the human trafficking? And tell us a little bit more about Advocacy Day coming up in February.
So the policy that we've helped with in the past, again, is like the vacatur and expungement, right? So survivors can have their records either completely cleared or just hidden away from the general public so that they can get housing, so they can get jobs, right? A lot of jobs require background checks. And while there's no discriminatory practices, it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. And so it is giving them an opportunity to chance at a better life. There's pimping and pandering used to be a felony on the third offense. It is now a felony on the second offense. We want it to be a felony on the first offense because we know that a buyer does not want to go home to his wife and be like, oh, honey, I got a felony because I was purchasing a minor for sex. They don't want to do that. It messes with their job. It messes with their social status, their bank account, their marriages, their children. And so having a misdemeanor is a little bit easier to hide than a felony. And so we've been trying for a couple of years, and we're trying again this year at Advocacy Day to really push SB 36, which is making pimping and pandering a felony on the first offense.
I agree. It needs to be.
And then safe crime reporting, right? So we want survivors to be able to report a crime. Were they beaten? Were they robbed? Were they held at gunpoint, right? That happens. And it doesn't matter how old a person is when they're being trafficked, they'll still be held at gunpoint. They'll still be robbed. They'll still be raped. They'll still be beaten. Those are the things that happen in trafficking that we oftentimes as a society have a really hard time stomaching. And so we want survivors to be able to safely report a crime without being arrested for prostitution. Because a lot of times, you do have law enforcement that are involved in trafficking and you have law enforcement that isn't. Well, survivor doesn't know the difference. Because if they've been purchased by a police officer before or a judge or an attorney, they're going to be really afraid to tell a police officer, I got beaten and, I had to go to the hospital and this is who did it. And so we want legislatively there to be an option for survivors to be able to report that to law enforcement without fear of it retaliation, like it coming back on them.
Coming back on them. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Advocacy Day that's coming up, and can people get involved?
So you can register on our website, www.streetgrace.org. Go to the events tab and click on the Advocacy Day photo, and it'll take you to the registration. We are going to be discussing these bills. We are going to have some legislators that are going to come talk to us. We are going to have a civil attorney who's working hotel cases to come and speak to us as well. It is open for the public. Anyone can come. We would like to see high numbers this year in person because after we have the program, then you get to go to your legislator's office in your district and you get to advocate for policy, right? The more people that advocate for something, the better chances are that it's going to get passed. Constituents, society, we have a voice in legislative policy work. And so it is really an opportunity for those who have a heart for this issue to really get involved and have their voices heard.
Absolutely. So I haven't been to the Advocacy Day. It's probably been 2 years or whatever, but you still have the thing where they can go and speak to their legislator and take the forms, right? And things of that nature. Can you explain that a little bit?
So The forms that we give out to people list all the policy initiatives. And then we also, Brooke does a wonderful job with this. She's done it the past several years. Is she provides a link to all the different districts, and people can just click that link and then figure out who their legislators are. And when we go over to the Capitol, they can actually go to the legislator's office and hand that piece of paper that has the initiatives on it. We hope to have bill numbers for most of these initiatives the day before. Sometimes they don't come till the day of, but it is a wonderful opportunity too for them to really read and see what are we really asking, right? What are we asking our legislators to pass? Especially with the bill numbers, people can also go online and look them up and read the bill. Some of them are, a little bit complicated for people who aren't policy minded, but for the most part, the general public can read it and just see what it is that we're advocating for survivors.
And for our audience and our listeners there, whether you're a nonprofit, a church organization, or an individual, you can get a group of people and register. And this is what Women of Community Impact did. And we had a great group of people that we took down there. And it was a great day to really get educated. You had some great speakers that came in there. And then is it still at the same place that you go across the street? I don't know if it's the same place or not. But anyways, we just had a great time doing that and going into the Capitol building, visiting those people. It was really a great opportunity. And I encourage you to go to www.streetgrace.com, go to the tab, register for that, get involved as well. So my last question, Brooke, what is the one policy initiative that you would like to see our state adopt?
I think what Faith just mentioned, making pimping and pandering a federal offense on the first case. So yes, because my approach to explaining not only pornography, but legislation such as this is that think of it in respect to educating a child about sex. How can we teach a child to have a healthy sexual relationship and expect respect if we have in legislation that bodies are commodities? And if we don't get this passed, we essentially are saying that a body is a commodity, right? If we're saying it's that we don't see it as serious enough to make it a felony on the first offense, then what are we essentially saying? So I always like to view legislation, because things have been so normalized in our society that it is easy to be oversaturated, to be to not take things as offensively as they would be if we were not to have been exposed slowly over time, right? So I always try to think of things, okay, if I'm talking to a little girl, how do I explain that this law is allowing her body to be a commodity? So I think we have to reframe how we view things, because even if we've had the best of intentions and we've protected our brain to the best of our ability, we've all seen too much just because we have cable. We've all been exposed to the normalization of the word pimp. We've all been exposed to people saying that prostitution is a choice. We have stigmas that we have to continuously try to remove from our brain. And that's the best way that I have found to do it is, okay, if I'm explaining this to a small child for their sex education, is a body being perceived as a commodity? So that's the one that I'm most excited about.
Absolutely, Brooke and Faith. I definitely agree with you. And, when we started this thing, Faith, you were talking about, you and Brooke, about how Street Grace gets into the school systems, and not every school system is easy to get into. And I just think it needs to be a part across the board in every school system, that we are educating and informing our children at every level of the game of what's out there, and how they can protect themselves.
Agreed.
So with that, I'd like for one of y'all just how people can reach out to Street Grace. I know you said www.streetgrace.com. Is that the best way to get a hold of you? And I know you have, don't you also have educational things that people can come for training at your corporate office, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, it is .org. And then if you do /resources, we have some online materials, but we love to do specific trainings for whatever audience you're thinking of. So Faith and I both put our information in the chat. And if you forget them, it's just info@streetgrace.org. That goes to both Faith and I, to be transparent. So you can email that as well. And just say, you know, hey, I'm the coach of a basketball team. I want all of the basketball moms to receive this training, or I work at a dentist office and I would love for my staff to retrieve this training. We have trained cable companies. You know, a person that's working up on the line is able to see when 6 men come in and out of a suburban house on a Wednesday. We all have a role that we can play. So if you're doubting where you fit into this fight, just send an email and say that, and we can tell you. And we've probably trained somebody that is in your same position. So do not fear reaching out. We would love to hear from you, and we would welcome you into the fight against this. But thank you so much, Celeste, for having us. We are so grateful. It's always wonderful to see you.
Yes.
And hope we get to see you at Advocacy Day coming up.
Absolutely. And matter of fact, we're going to be talking about that tomorrow morning with the Women of Community Impact, and how we can, with our coffee and connections, and how we can get a group together and go down for Advocacy Day. It's time that we, you know, march down there together and get that bill passed right there, or at least let them know that what our thoughts are about that. So with that, Brooke and Faith, I just want to thank you both for being here, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning, and I'll send you the links for that. I want to thank WCEG Talk Radio and Penny Rogers for the opportunity and this platform to get this message out. As you heard me say, you can find WCEG Talk Radio, and you can find the segment on YouTube. You can find it on our Facebook pages, and you know, rewatch it. Go to streetgrace.com. Look at the resources that they have. Look at the things that they're doing, and you know, it's important that we get involved in our communities. You know, we are given this beautiful life to live. And it's not what we can do for ourselves, but what we can do for other people. And we can all make a mark and be involved and help other people. So with that, I want to thank you, ladies. I appreciate you. And for our audience and listeners, I just want to let you know in February, our next show is February 13th. And I'll be having Sarah Poe with Poe's Accounting Services on the show. And we're going to be talking about everything that has to do with taxes and the love of money and the love of taxes right there. The other thing, on the 27th of February, I'm going to have 2 great ladies, Callie D'Angelo with Collective Edge and Renee Bird Lewis with Gwinnett Coalition. And those are going to be 2 great shows in February. So with that said, everybody have a wonderful and blessed day, and our hearts love your hearts. And thank you, WCEG Talk Radio, and Faith and Brooke. Thank you so much with Street Grace. Love you guys.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you for having us.